Good morning. Well, thank you for joining We Got Your Mac. Another episode today. We're here talking about Microsoft and Mac. And for many organizations, it's been historically an either or discussion. But for today's conversation, we're joined by my friend and colleague, Steve Weiner, who's the principal architect of our Advanced Solutions Group. Victoria and we've both worked with Steve in the past, so we're delighted that he could join us today.
And to be honest, Steve's help when I first joined SHI in understanding technical issues and explaining them in English has been fantastic. Kevin's been very supportive about this as well, but Steve really helped me out when I first joined SHI. So
It takes a village.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us, Steve. Welcome to We Got Your Mac.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
So listen, Steve, the first question I have, you have this huge setup back there, all those nice toys and stuff. But what's the device? What kind of device are you using right now? Mac, Windows, what?
Yeah, right. That's the question. I have both, right? I have a M1 MacBook Pro, soon to be M3, I think, and I have a Surface Laptop Studio.
So you use them both. Which one do you use more? Why do you use two different?
I'm ex-Apple from a long time ago, another life. And before that, it's been everything, right? So I've always seen both. I can't sit in one camp. To me, they both have their benefits. Some of the best times of my life was running Mac Snow Leopard and Windows 7 on a MacBook 17-inch MacBook Pro. So
that's right. When you joined us, you came from Apple Retail. Is that right?
I did. Yeah, that was a while ago. But yeah, I've always used both all the time.
Right. So why do you think IT, right, leans towards Windows when folks like you, who are the SCs, the system engineers, the architects, they use Mac on a daily basis?
Yeah, I think people are they're polarized by nature, right? So that just extends to IT. I don't think it's a secret that, Windows is, the majority of the corporate world, mainly because of the systems that enterprise is built on. But I think Mac is what people are comfortable with. And it's like the computer for consumers and people. And employees are consumers and employees are people, right? So it kind of makes sense when people want to use Mac in the workplace. They just want to use what they're comfortable with and what's reliable. And I think it could be intimidating to IT, especially when you have, individuals and SMEs who their background is Windows management. But I think that's coming to an end.
So, obviously you're in a very technical role. We're talking to an audience of decision makers here and thinking about why a decision maker would choose one device over another, or maybe in your case, they'd be right in choosing both. But do you think that kind of bias towards Windows is down to a lack of understanding or knowledge? Because we've talked about management tools in previous episodes. We talked about security in episode 5. We talked about some of the cost elements in episode 3 with Dave Groover. So is it things like the applications, the gap between Windows and Mac applications that maybe is where we need to focus, where the problem is?
Yeah, I think somewhat. I think it's I think the best way to look at it is this, right? A lot of things change and it's hard to keep up, right? How much of business has shifted to web apps, right? Are we really installing thick client applications anymore? It's like, this is not compatible with Mac. This is compatible with Windows. I think that's come to an end, if not fully coming to an end. Obviously, there's niche software, right? But as a whole, I think decision makers. Most decision makers I speak to have a Mac, so that's a little bit of a different story. They want what they want, but I think unified endpoint management is real. I think moving to SaaS and web-based cloud applications is real. And I think
what do you mean unified endpoint management? What is that?
Right. So when we look at it as IT, right, I have X application for managing my endpoints. I use something, right? I think it's very easy now to use the same platform for everything, right? I can have one set of standards for Windows, for Mac, for Android, for iOS. it's not as complicated anymore to bring
So two
everyone in.
folks claim they have UEM. Broadcom, formerly known as VMware or Workspace ONE, and then Microsoft. So are you saying one of those will win the app gap story or part of it?
Yeah, I mean, my the lens of my perspective is somewhat biased, just for the sense that I am a Microsoft principal architect, right? I work on the Microsoft platform. But what I will say is you see attitudes tend to change, right? So we saw Microsoft's attitude change around 2018 to say, look, we are arms open towards Mac. I mean, most of those show up now. You meet with a Microsoft developer, they're going to be using a Mac, right? So just from a management standpoint, they have made big, broad changes to be very accessible to organizations who want to manage their Mac with their PCs. The goal is make it easy to adopt. The device doesn't matter in the way it mattered 5, 10 years ago.
And so, okay, that's the management piece. You can manage all devices, one platform. What about the other apps that are in the gap necessarily? Are the productivity apps? Are there security apps? Talk to me a little bit about the other things that Microsoft specifically can solve.
Yeah, I mean, I almost I put Mac and modern management in the same boat, right? Getting someone to manage their PC in a modern way is very much like managing a Mac. Your biggest gap is going to be those legacy apps that talk to on-premise, mainframe type systems. So, in that case, Mac always had a superpower of being able to run Windows flawlessly. I think everything changed with the move to Apple Silicon, right? And not necessarily, in a bad way, it just changed where we have new options, right? I think, you still get the best of both worlds, right? If you want to virtualize Windows, you 100% can, right? Products that can do that. I know Parallels does a great job on after Apple's transition to their own silicon. Microsoft also has, Windows 365, so simplified cloud PCs. So if you need to run legacy applications, right, x86 stuff, it's not an issue. The barrier to entry is low level from a technical effort perspective.
So I always hear virtualization is the answer for the things you cannot do natively, but tell me about what you lose in experience with, say, Win 365.
Yeah, so the thing about Windows 365, and I'll say cloud PC because I've been talking a lot about it, and the naming is atrocious. So I will say with Microsoft, you should be able to get certified in the naming. They should give you that, right? If you can nail the naming, that's a skill in itself. Now, when you think about just a cloud PC, right? It's like take the end part of virtualization, right? You open a client, you log into your PC in the cloud, it's virtual, but without all the back end. I'm not a VDI guy. I'm not virtualization. I don't know clusters and pools. You don't need to anymore. I can say, hey, I just want to, buy a license to give my user a cloud PC on their Mac. They can open that up and log in and do what they have to do. And I think that's really important from an industry perspective because that's going to make organizations who have the single IT mindset open up. Want to use Mac? No problem. There you go. There's your app.
Victoria is very concerned about security. Tell her a little bit about how you help customers ease their mind as it pertains to security apps.
Well, I think what's important, and I'll avoid the rabbit hole of zero trust, right? Because that's the buzziest of buzzwords. But the reality,
We don't have time for all of that today, Steve. I don't think.
we don't. We absolutely don't. But I will say this, right? The framework is real and it's simple, right? At the end of the day, the best security you can have is you want to secure who is accessing what on something, on a device, on a phone, on a platform, on a computer. And if you can protect that, you've nailed it. Now, everything around it to get there is where the technical chatter comes in. But honestly, yeah, another area I work on is like, for example, Microsoft's Defender suite of products, which is multi-platform and even more so than the endpoint management. So I'm helping folks stand up endpoint security, cloud security, app security, but platform agnostic. We can give the same experience on Mac as we can give on Windows or on iOS, and it's holistic.
It's a consolidation story, though, too, though, right? People are taking out point products. Like, tell me what those are. Is it like CrowdStrike? Is it Sentinel-1? Is it like, what are you replacing with, say, advanced threat protection?
It could be everything, right? And I'll get into it even with our own security folks, right? I showed up in 2020 starting to do this, and you have guys who've been doing it for a very long time, and gals, yeah, right? Just folks who've made security their right, that's their bread and butter, and mine is more modern. But let me take a pass at it this way, right? It is consolidation, right? It's consolidation in products. It's also consolidation in effort, right? I think as the way economics are for IT, right? Leaner teams. We want faster times to get to better end results, especially with security, right? People do get breached a lot. We hear about it. So, folks are moving away from that mindset of let me bring in these big, heavy products per discipline, as opposed to let me consolidate and let me get to where I want to go faster.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, Steve, because one of the things I'm seeing in the work I do within strategic insights is people really putting a lot more effort into overall vendor consolidation than they have in the past. There's been a lot of talk about it, but it's not actually always that easy to unpick the existing architecture and to replace these. So it's not a question of this is a quick project. I bought that, I can just rip everything out and replace it. They're quite a heavy lift to actually do that properly, but it does actually seem to be happening now rather than just being talked about. So I guess it's another opportunity. If you're making these changes, then that is probably the time to say, okay, if we're looking at Mac while we're making these changes, it's not a bad time to look at deployment at scale.
Yeah, and it could it's going to get messy, right? Whoever tells you these things are going to be uprooting anything, right? And I do it all the time, right? My team's the messiest, so we get in there and the things we do, and Kev has seen this, right? We're disruptors, right? But I think the problem, there's a few things, right? It's that end goal in mind. Like, is this going to get us where we want? Long-term cost savings, better results, better end user experience, better admin experience. It's also, you got to be very careful to not lump things together. I could see folks going, okay, well, I'll adopt this unified endpoint platform. Oh, that'll give me an opportunity to bring in Macs. That'll give me an opportunity to do this. And now, before you know it, your project to do one thing has snowballed, and now it can feel overwhelming. So it's important to pace. It's very important to pace, chunk these things out, and make sure we're staying, one objective at a time. We want to implement Macs. We need to do these two things. Let's do those two things. The rest is good long term, but we got to be thinking strategy. That's the only way to do it.
That's very important, the things you're bringing up. It is the technical conversation, but it's also how you effect change, how you communicate this out, how you ensure people understand what they're doing. And so tell us a little bit about how people mistake technology for change management.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, look, some of our biggest projects have been involving organizations that are upwards of 120,000 users. I'm working on a project right now where we are literally moving 60,000 devices from all platforms into one platform, right? So 60,000 from everything, Mac, Windows, the whole thing. The hardest part is the people and the habits we have, right? The tech, if you let us run around and do the tech, yeah, we could get that done, no problem. But it is the change. It's the adoption. It's the things we're used to. The strongest thing you'll find in IT are the things we've been doing forever, because it's the way we've been doing them. Breaking the status quo, breaking the habits, afraid to rock the boat. That's the hardest part. And sometimes we play that role, my team, of just, it's going to be okay. Let's take a breath together. Grab my hand. We're going to get you through this. Like, once you see it in action in a 5-device pilot, stakeholder's going to be happy. So-and-so is going to be happy. That's the hardest part. That's what makes these things, yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. As close as I'm ever going to get to being one.
Yeah. Well, we had a good conversation with Christian Hubler in episode 8 about the importance of making sure that the communications are effective, and that actually, you consider everything that's going to be different. And as you say, particularly when it's, large numbers, you're doing this at scale, the potential impact of 60,000 people suddenly finding something's different and not understanding that that's going to happen and having to navigate it. That's a massive dip in productivity potentially if you haven't done the education piece, if you haven't understood the way those people work on a day-to-day basis and what you're going to have to show them that has changed. So, one of the things that came up when, you and Kevin and I were discussing this before was the fact that, it can be a lot easier to move people from Windows to Mac than perhaps it is the other way around. And I know you have some quite strong opinions on that. Do you want to talk us through a bit of that?
Well, no one's moving from Mac to Windows. It's a one way, and it's the way it's always been.
I know one guy. Yeah.
It's here's the way it works, right? Your Mac people are your Mac people, your Windows people are your Windows people, and then you have the Windows folks who just haven't asked for their Mac yet, right? And because the organization doesn't offer it, people accept it. And any other thing, and the price thing has become so great; it's so not a factor anymore, right? I have a Surface laptop that costs more than some Macs, right, and vice versa. But I think what it is once there's a true choice and the organization is comfortable in their footprint enough to say, yeah, it's not it's not an extra effort for me to offer Mac, right? And then it's really not an issue. Switching to Mac, again, you really have to evaluate. We call it workforce analysis. A big thing we do is looking at, how do you group your users and what do they do? And we never solve for the fringe. The worst thing someone could do is bring up to me, well, let's say I'm going to move to Mac. I can't because, I have certain users who do X, Y, and Z. What's the numbers on that? Is it 2%? Are we really going to make these broad strategy changes for 2%? No, you leave the fringe, because by the time you've done addressing the masses, the fringe might have solved itself, because those are just big changes that have to be made. If so-and-so can't use a Mac or use a cloud solution or use a insert whatever technology because they're stuck on an app that some independent service person is still managing for them and it's one guy, that's not sustainable anyway. You can't base.
But you said something earlier about how Apple trains the consumer and how consumers are users. So
yeah, no, I think IT, I really wish more IT folks would understand that. Apple has done a tremendous thing, and whether you're a fan or not, it's undeniable. And I know this because I know Android people who respect it as well, right? You have the way Apple educates the consumers is unrivaled. There is not a tech entity that does that the way Apple does. They train consumers without them even knowing it, right? They educate the consumers. So our users at our enterprises and our organizations, they're consumers. They're the same folks who buy iPhones for their family and their, for themselves and update every year and do iCloud, and they're used to backing up. These are things Apple has educated that you have now built in for your users. So to not take advantage of that, would be, it's definitely a miss if we're not.
I thought that was very interesting. What do you think, Victoria?
Yeah, I mean, I liked the point that when we talked about it before that you guys made about you don't need to be technical to use this technology. Yes, when we talked to Kristen, she talked about the fact that just because you use it in your personal life doesn't mean to say you're necessarily going to know exactly how to use it for business, but you at least know where to start. It feels familiar, it feels comfortable. I mean, I know, Kevin, if we gave you a Windows PC and an Android on your phone, you'd probably go and sit and cry in a corner somewhere quietly, because you are so plugged into the ecosystem. It's practically an extension of your body and your mind. But I think a lot of people, it has that familiarity, so they don't necessarily feel intimidated by it and worried by the things that maybe are different because they're using it for work. At least it's within a familiar landscape.
I think it's not that Windows, doesn't have that. I think it's just as a the culture isn't the same, right? To say someone uses a home PC so they're going to be comfortable getting a PC at work, that doesn't exist. But on the Apple side, it really does. So even if someone's non-technical, to take what they do every day from a whether it's the phone or they use a Mac, most of that will apply, right? So to definitely to take advantage of it is important.
Got it. So your top tips then are express empathy for the app gap by starting with your unified endpoint management approach. You can unify the way you develop apps, how you manage your PCs, but then move into not the fringe, but things that people use all the time, like productivity suites and security suites.
Yeah, you're going to look at, I look at it in 3 tiers, right? Like, there was a time where Office for Mac was very different than Office for PC. That's over, right? So here's the deal. If you're basic, if you're a user and your bread and butter is productivity apps like Microsoft Office, you're good to go. Let's take it a next tier. Let's say you use Visio or Project, things that aren't Mac native. I could very easily use a product like Parallels to virtualize Windows on Apple Silicon, because Windows has Apple Silicon native, ARM friendly versions, separate thing. But that's easy. My next tier would be something I can't virtualize. I can just go to cloud PCs. And if I go to cloud PCs, I don't need VDI background or expertise. I could just deploy that. So you're covered. You just got to understand where those tiers are and which users fall into those tiers.
2, solve for the masses, not the outlier. And then 3, it's not the tech, it is change management. Do I got that right?
Yeah, it's understanding, the war is over. The Mac PC war, right? It's not a war anymore. It's over. Our biggest challenges are the habits. So yeah, it's the adoption.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Steve. We really appreciate it. It's been an interesting chat. Good to have some time to catch up with you again. I don't think we hadn't spoken for a long time until now. Kevin and I will be back again soon with another episode of We Got Your Mac. In the meantime, for those of you listening, if there is anything more that you'd like to find out, if you want to look for previous episodes, if you want to find the resources, the blog posts, information about the various guests we've had, then please go to wegotyourmac.com for all of the information about everything we do related to this podcast.
Yeah, and send us some questions so we can answer them on the air. We have a new email address, wegotyourmac@shi.com. We'd love to get some listener emails and some back and forth going on with you. So send us a note and tell us how much you love the show and what you want us to talk about.